That's the boy from the orphanage, she gasped. It was the mafia boss's lost son portrait. The rain in Greyhaven did not simply fall. It hammered against the cracked pavement and the peeling siding of the buildings, turning the city into a watercolor painting left out in a storm. Inside the Harbor Light home for children. The sound of the downpour was a constant, drumming rhythm against the roof, drowning out the low hum of the radiator that struggled to combat the November chill. Maya Ellis sat at her cluttered desk, the surface invisible beneath a mountain of case files, rejection letters for grant applications, and a pile of plastic toys that needed mending. It was past 8 in the evening, and her shift had technically ended 2 hours ago, yet she remained in the corner of the small, dim recreation room. A boy sat alone on a worn-out beanbag chair. Eli was around 9 years old, though he was small for his age, with a fragility that made him look as if a strong wind might carry him away. He was stacking wooden blocks with intense, silent concentration. He did not speak to the other children, and he certainly did not speak to the prospective foster parents who occasionally drifted through the facility like sharks circling a reef. Maya watched him over the rim of her coffee mug. She had seen many children come through Harbor Light, each carrying their own invisible luggage of trauma, but Eli was different. He had arrived 6 months ago, dropped off by a police cruiser after being found wandering near the rail yards, mute and shivering. There was no paperwork. No missing persons report matched his description. Just a boy with dark, terrified eyes and a jagged, pale scar hidden just beneath the hairline on his left temple. A sudden clap of thunder shook the window panes. Eli flinched violently, his hand knocking over the tower of blocks. He curled inward instantly, knees to his chest, arms wrapping around his head as if expecting a blow. Maya was across the room in 3 strides. She did not touch him immediately. She knew better. She knelt on the scuffed linoleum, keeping her voice low and steady. "Eli, it is just the storm," she said softly. "Just the thunder. You are safe here. Look at me, slowly." The boy lowered his arms. His breathing was rapid, hitching in his chest. He looked at her, his dark eyes wide and glassy. He did not say a word, but he reached out and gripped the fabric of her cardigan sleeve. His knuckles were white. He held on as if she were the only solid thing in a spinning world. Maya stayed there on the floor for 20 minutes, ignoring the ache in her knees, until Eli's breathing leveled out. She gently brushed a lock of dark hair away from his forehead, her thumb grazing the small, crescent-shaped scar near his temple. He usually pulled away when anyone got close to his face, especially if they had a camera or a phone raised, but he leaned slightly into her touch. He was a ghost of a child, haunting the halls of the orphanage, and Maya felt a fierce, protective ache in her chest every time she looked at him. The door to the office creaked open, and Sister Joan, the director of Harbor Light, bustled in. She was a formidable woman in her 60s who managed to run the underfunded facility with iron discipline and a heart that was perhaps too soft for the job. "Maya, you are still here," Sister Joan sighed, shaking her wet umbrella. "Go home. You cannot save the world on an empty stomach." "I was just finishing up some notes on Eli," Maya said, standing and smoothing her skirt. "He had a rough evening with the storm." "He always does," Sister Joan said, her expression softening as she glanced at the boy, who had returned to his blocks. "But listen, I have news. Good news for a change. We have received an inquiry from a donor, an anonymous one." Maya raised an eyebrow. "We get anonymous donations of $20 here and there. You look like we just won the lottery." "This is different," the older woman said, lowering her voice. "They are talking about a significant grant, enough to fix the roof, replace the heating system, and maybe even hire another counselor. But there is a catch. The donor wants a face-to-face meeting to finalize the details." "That sounds standard," Maya said. "When are they coming?" "They are not coming here," Sister Joan said, fiddling with the crucifix around her neck. "We have to go to them. The meeting is at the donor's private residence tomorrow night, in the Heights." Maya frowned. The Heights was the wealthiest district in Greyhaven, a place of gated mansions and private security patrols, worlds away from the grimy streets of the neighborhood surrounding Harbor Light. It was unusual for a donor to demand a private audience at their home. Usually, they wanted a photo opportunity at the orphanage to show how charitable they were. It feels a little odd, Maya admitted, but for enough money to fix the roof, I would meet them on the moon. Exactly my thinking. Sister Joan nodded. Now go, get some sleep. Maya grabbed her coat and waved goodbye to Eli, who offered her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod in return. Outside, the rain had not let up. It was coming down in sheets, blurring the streetlights into streaks of neon. Maya ran to her car, a battered sedan that was 15 years old and sounded like a dying tractor. She slid into the driver's seat, shivering, and turned the key. The engine sputtered, groaned, and died. No, 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 Maya pleaded, hitting the steering wheel. Not tonight. She tried again. Nothing but a hollow click. With a groan of frustration, Maya grabbed the jumper cables from the back seat and stepped back out into the deluge. The hood of her car was stuck, requiring a violent jiggle to release, and within seconds, her hair was plastered to her skull and her shoes were soaked through. She stood by the open hood, looking helplessly at the dark street. It was nearly 9 o'clock at night in a bad part of town, and the few cars passing by sprayed dirty water onto the sidewalk without slowing down. Then, a vehicle slowed. It was a black sedan, sleek and low to the ground, with tinted windows that reflected the streetlights like obsidian. It purred to a halt beside her, the engine idling with a deep, powerful rumble that vibrated in the pavement beneath her feet. The passenger window rolled down, but no one spoke. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He unfolded a large black umbrella, ignoring the rain that bounced off the taut fabric. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that was tailored to perfection, hugging broad shoulders and a lean frame. His shoes were polished leather, completely out of place in the puddle-strewn gutter. "Need a hand?" he asked. His voice was a low baritone, smooth and cool, cutting through the noise of the rain. Maya wiped water from her eyes, feeling suddenly incredibly small and disheveled. "I think my battery is dead. I have cables, but I do not have another car to jump it." The man stepped closer, moving with a fluid, predatory grace. Under the shelter of his umbrella, the streetlights illuminated his face. He was strikingly handsome, with sharp cheekbones, a strong jawline shadowed by stubble, and eyes the color of steel. But there was a hardness to him, a cold reserve that made Maya instinctively take a half-step back. He noticed her retreat, a flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, or irritation, crossed his face. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. "I did not say you were," Maya countered, lifting her chin. "You did not have to." He gestured to her car. "Get in out of the rain." "I will call a service for you. I cannot afford a tow truck right now," Maya blurted out before she could stop herself. "I just need a jump." The stranger studied her for a moment. His gaze was intense, sweeping over her wet clothes and her defiant expression. It felt like being scanned by a laser. Without a word, he pulled a phone from his pocket, tapped the screen, and held it to his ear. "Send the flatbed to 4th and Main now." He hung up and looked at her. "It is covered. Wait in your car. Or mine. It is warm inside." "I will wait here," Maya said, crossing her arms over her chest to hide the shiver that ran through her. The man did not argue. He simply stood there with her, holding the umbrella so that it shielded her more than him. The shoulder of his expensive suit began to darken with rain, but he did not flinch. "I am Adrian," he said after a long silence. "Maya," she replied. "Maya," he repeated, testing the name. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second, the cold mask slipped. He looked tired, not sleepy, but weary in a way that went down to the bone. "You work at the orphanage?" He gestured with his chin toward the Harbor Light sign flickering dimly down the block. "Yes," she said. "That is good work." Adrian said, "Hard work. It has its moments." Maya let out a short, breathless laugh, the absurdity of the situation catching up to her. Standing in a monsoon with a man who looked like he stepped out of a magazine. waiting for a tow truck she did not order. When she laughed, Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, focusing on her mouth. The intensity of his stare sent a jolt of heat through her that had nothing to do with the car's heater. It was a dangerous look, possessing a gravity that pulled at her. The tow truck arrived 10 minutes later. Adrian handled the driver, spoke a few low words, and handed the man a bill that Maya could not see. "Go home, Maya," Adrian said, turning back to her as her car was hoisted up. "Get dry." "Thank you," she said, feeling like the words were inadequate. He gave a sharp nod, turned, and got back into his black sedan. As he drove away, disappearing into the rainy night, Maya felt a strange vibration in her chest, a mix of relief and a lingering, unsettling curiosity. Later that night, wrapped in a blanket in her small apartment, Maya opened her laptop. She typed the name into the search bar, Adrian Moretti. The results filled the screen, a chaotic mix of headlines. Adrian Moretti, CEO of Moretti Holdings, announces new skyscraper project. Moretti family linked to organized crime investigation. Charges dropped. The Prince of Greyhaven. Businessman or mob boss? Maya scrolled through images of him attending galas, cutting ribbons, and walking out of courthouses flanked by lawyers. In every photo, his expression was the same: cold, controlled, unreadable. There were articles whispering about the Moretti syndicate, about territories and illicit shipping deals, but nothing ever stuck. On paper, he was a legitimate real estate mogul. In the streets, his name carried a weight that made people lower their voices. Maya closed the laptop, her heart beating a little faster. This was the man who had stood in the rain with her. The danger she had sensed was real. The next day at Harbor Light, the storm had passed, but the tension remained. The orphanage was overcrowded, the noise level constant. Around noon, a volunteer was clearing lunch trays. She turned too quickly and bumped into a table, sending a metal tray crashing to the tile floor. The sound was explosive, like a gunshot in the enclosed space. In the corner, Eli screamed. It was a raw, terrifying sound. He dropped to the floor, scrambling under the table, his hands clawing at his ears. Maya dropped the file she was holding and ran to him. The other children went silent, watching with wide eyes. "Eli, it is okay," Maya said, sliding under the table with him. She ignored the gum stuck to the underside of the wood and the dust on the floor. She reached for him, but he was thrashing, his eyes squeezed shut, lost in a memory that was clearly not about a lunch tray. She grabbed his shoulders firmly. "Eli, look at me. Breathe." He was hyperventilating, his small chest heaving. Maya pulled him against her chest, wrapping her arms around him, rocking him back and forth. 1, 2, 3, breathe. She whispered into his hair. "I have got you. You are here. You are with Maya." Slowly, the tension left his body. His sobbing turned into quiet hiccups. He turned his face into her shirt, his hand finding her fingers and gripping them tight. His palm was sweaty, his grip desperate. Maya held him until his trembling stopped, her chin resting on the top of his head. She traced the scar at his hairline again, wondering for the 100th time what kind of life could leave a 9-year-old boy so terrified of a loud noise. Someone had hurt this child. The thought made a cold fury rise in her throat. Later that afternoon, Sister Joan called Maya into her office. The older woman looked pale and was clutching a handkerchief. "Maya, I need a favor," Sister Joan said. "I have come down with a migraine. It is the pressure, the weather. I cannot see straight." "Oh no," Maya said. "Go lie down. I will handle the floor." "No," Sister Joan said. "The meeting, the donor. I cannot go tonight. I need you to go in my place." "Me?" Maya widened her eyes. "Sister, I am just a caseworker. You are the director. You know the numbers better than I do." Sister Joan insisted. "You know what the kids need. You are the best person to make the case. Please." "Maya, if we miss this appointment, we might lose the funding." Maya hesitated. The memory of Adrian Moretti and the articles she had read last night flickered in her mind. But this was for the orphanage. This was for Eli. "Okay," Maya said. "I will go." "Good." Sister Joan exhaled. "A car is being sent for you at 7. Wear something nice. And remember, whoever this donor is, Keep it polite. We need this money." At 7 o'clock sharp, a black town car idled outside Maya's apartment building. She smoothed down the skirt of her navy blue dress, the nicest thing she owned, though it was 3 years old, and stepped inside. The ride to the Heights took 30 minutes. The scenery changed from cracked sidewalks and bodegas to manicured lawns and high stone walls. The car turned through a massive wrought iron gate, winding up a long driveway lined with ancient oaks. The mansion at the top of the hill was imposing, built of gray stone, resembling a fortress more than a home. It was lit by tasteful, golden floodlights. The driver opened her door, and Maya stepped out, clutching her folder of grant proposals like a shield. A bodyguard with an earpiece met her at the massive front doors. He patted her down quickly, professionally, and then nodded for her to enter. The interior was breathtaking. The foyer was a cavern of white marble and dark wood. A chandelier the size of a small car hung from the ceiling, casting prisms of light onto the walls. Expensive art hung in gilded frames, landscapes, abstracts, pieces that probably cost more than the entire annual budget of Harbor Light. Maya felt a tingling mix of fear and curiosity. The silence in the house was heavy, oppressive. "Mister, Moretti will be with you shortly," the bodyguard said, his voice echoing. "Please, wait in the study." He pointed toward a set of double doors on the second-floor landing. Maya began to ascend the grand staircase. Her heels clicked on the marble steps. She trailed her hand along the polished mahogany banister, feeling like an intruder in a museum. Halfway up the stairs, she stopped. On the landing wall, dominating the space, was a massive oil portrait. It was framed in heavy gold. It was a painting of a child, a boy, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, wearing a crisp blue button-down shirt. He was sitting on a garden bench, laughing, his head thrown back in pure, unadulterated joy. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She took a step closer, her breath catching in her throat, the shape of the eyes, the curve of the chin, the unruly dark hair, and there, captured by the artist's brush with photorealistic precision, was a small, crescent-shaped scar just at the hairline on the left temple. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The boy in the painting was not a stranger. The boy in the painting was the terrified child who had clung to her hand that very afternoon. Maya stared, her mind racing to connect the dots that seemed impossible. The wealthy businessman, the missing paperwork, the boy who appeared from nowhere. She brought a hand to her mouth, the shock physically jolting her. "That is the boy from the orphanage," she gasped aloud, her voice ringing out in the quiet hall. Behind her, the sound of footsteps on the marble stopped abruptly. Maya spun around. Adrian Moretti stood at the top of the stairs. He was wearing a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. But the glass was tilting dangerously, the liquid sloshing over the rim. He was staring at the portrait, and then his gaze snapped to Maya. His face, usually a mask of stone-cold control, was cracked wide open. All the color had drained from his skin. His eyes were wide, burning with a mixture of disbelief and a terrible, sudden hope. His voice was a ragged whisper when he spoke. "What did you just say?" "Leave us," Adrian said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made the air in the vast hallway feel suddenly thin. The bodyguard who had escorted Maya up the stairs did not hesitate. He gave a sharp nod and turned on his heel, his footsteps retreating quickly down the marble staircase, leaving Maya alone with the man who owned the house and the ghost of the boy in the painting. Adrian did not look at Maya immediately. He was still staring at the portrait, his eyes tracing the painted features of the laughing child with a hunger that was painful to witness. The glass of amber liquid in his hand trembled, the ice clinking softly against the crystal, betraying the tremors running through his powerful frame. "Come with me," he said, turning abruptly. It was not a request. He strode down the hallway toward a set of double mahogany doors, and Maya followed, her legs feeling unsteady. She clutched her folder of grant proposals against her chest as if it were armor, though she knew it would offer no protection against the storm she had just unleashed. The study was dim, lit only by a green banker's lamp on the desk and the glow of a dying fire in the hearth. The room smelled of old paper, leather, and something sharper, like expensive scotch and suppressed rage. Adrian walked behind his massive oak desk but did not sit. He placed his drink down with a heavy thud and leaned forward, his knuckles turning white as he braced his weight on the wood. "Tell me exactly what you said on the stairs," he demanded. His voice was low, vibrating with a dangerous intensity. "And do not lie to me, Maya." Maya stood in the center of the Persian rug, feeling very small. "I said that is the boy from the orphanage. Why?" Adrian's eyes bored into hers. "Why would you say that? That is a portrait of my son, Luca. He's been gone for 4 years." "Because I know him," Maya said, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength as she thought of Eli. She took a breath, forcing herself to meet Adrian's terrifying gaze. "We call him Eli. He came to Harbor Light 6 months ago. The police found him wandering near the train yards. He does not speak much. He is terrified of cameras. And he has a scar. Mr. Moretti. A small, crescent-shaped scar right at his hairline on the left side, just like the boy in the painting." Adrian flinched as if she had struck him. He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, his chest heaving. "A scar," he whispered. "He got that when he was 3. He fell off a swing set in the garden. He opened his eyes, and the grief in them was so raw, so bottomless, that Maya felt her own heart ache in sympathy. But that grief was quickly eclipsed by a surge of dark, volatile energy. Adrian pushed off the desk and began to pace the room, his movements predatory and agitated. "My ex-wife took him," he said, the words tearing out of him. "It was during a conflict, a war between families. It was not safe here, so she ran. She said she was taking him somewhere I could never find them, to keep him away from my life. I spent millions trying to track them. 2 years ago, I received intelligence that they had been in a car accident in Europe. I was told there were no survivors." He stopped pacing and turned to Maya, his face hard, the mask of the ruthless businessman slipping to reveal the dangerous father underneath. "If he is at your orphanage, if he is alive, I am going to get him. Tonight." He reached for the phone on his desk, his hand snatching up the receiver. "I will bring the car around. We are going to Harbor Light." "No!" Maya cried out. The word was sharp, echoing in the quiet room. Adrian froze, the phone halfway to his ear. He looked at her with incredulity, as if he could not believe anyone would dare to counter him. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "You cannot just storm in there in the middle of the night," Maya said, stepping forward. Her fear was still there, pounding in her ears, but her protective instinct for Eli was stronger. "He is a traumatized child, Mr. Moretti. He's terrified of loud noises, of strangers, of sudden movements. If you go in there with your security team and try to take him, you will traumatize him further. You will break him." "I am his father," Adrian snarled, slamming the phone back into its cradle. "He does not know that," Maya argued, holding her ground even as he stepped closer, looming over her. "To him, you might be just another danger. He has been abandoned. He's been on the streets, and he has spent 6 months in a system that has failed him. He needs stability. He needs safety. You cannot just rip him out of his bed because you want him back. You have to do this the right way." "The right way?" Adrian let out a bitter, harsh laugh. "You are talking to me about rules? I have men who could dismantle that building brick by brick within the hour. I am talking to you about a little boy's heart," Maya shouted back, her voice cracking with emotion. Silence descended on the room. They stood only feet apart, breathing heavily. The tension was electric, a physical weight in the air. Maya could see the muscle ticking in Adrian's jaw. She could see the fine tremor in his hands, not from weakness, but from the immense effort it took to hold back his violent impulses. For the first time, she saw him not as a mob boss or a billionaire, but as a man who had been hollowed out by loss and was suddenly flooded with a terrifying hope. Adrian stared at her. He saw a woman in a simple, worn dress, with messy hair and tired eyes, standing between a powerful crime lord and his desires without flinching. He saw courage. Slowly, the tension in his shoulders released. He exhaled a long, shaky breath and ran a hand through his dark hair. "You are right," he said quietly. Maya blinked, surprised by the sudden concession. "I am? If I scare him—" Adrian's voice broke. "If I scare him, he will never look at me the way he used to." He walked over to the fireplace and stared into the dying embers. "Tell me about him. Does he seem happy?" "He is safe," Maya said softly, moving to stand beside him. Though she kept a respectful distance, "but he is not happy. He's quiet. He draws a lot. He clings to me when it thunders. He needs a lot of love, Adrian, and he needs to know that he will not be abandoned again." Adrian turned to look at her. The firelight cast shadows across the sharp planes of his face, softening the hardness of his eyes. "I will never leave him again," he vowed. "I would burn this city to the ground before I let anyone take him from me again." He looked at Maya, his gaze shifting from intense to appraising. He took a step closer to her. The air between them seemed to hum. She could smell his scent, sandalwood, rain, and expensive tobacco. It was intoxicating. "I need your help." "Maya," he said, "I am already helping." She replied, "No, I need you on the inside." Adrian's eyes searched hers. "I cannot just walk in there and claim him without proof. The courts, the system, they will want DNA tests, paperwork, hearings. It could take months. I need to be close to him now. I need to make sure he is safe until I can bring him home." He paused, his voice lowering. "I will double the grant. No, I will triple it. Harbor Light will never have to worry about money again. I will pay for the roof, the heating, new beds, everything, but in exchange, you help me. You help me navigate the system. You get me access to his records. You help me see him without scaring him." Maya hesitated. She knew she should say no. She knew getting involved with a man like Adrian Moretti was walking onto a bridge that was already burning. But then she thought of Eli, sleeping on a lumpy mattress, and she looked at Adrian, seeing the desperation in his eyes. "I do not want your money for me," she said firmly, "but the orphanage needs it. And Eli needs his father." "So you will do it?" Adrian asked. "I will do it," she whispered. "Thank you." The words were soft, intimate. They were standing so close now that Maya could feel the heat radiating from his body. She looked up at him, and for a moment, the world outside the study ceased to exist. There was only the firelight, the smell of rain on his clothes, and the undeniable pull between them. "I should go," Maya said, her voice barely audible. "Sister Joan will be waiting for a report." Adrian nodded, though he did not step back immediately. "I will have the driver take you." The car ride back to the orphanage was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence than the one that had filled the mansion. It was heavy, laden with unspoken thoughts. The rain had turned to a drizzle, streaking the windows of the town car. Maya and Adrian sat in the back seat. The divider was up, sealing them in a private cocoon of leather and darkness. "My father was a hard man," Adrian said suddenly, staring out the window. "He taught me that showing emotion was a weakness, that loving anything too much gave your enemies a target." Maya turned to look at his profile. "He was wrong," she said. "I used to think so," Adrian replied. "Then I lost Luca, and I thought perhaps the old man was right. If I had not loved him so much, it would not have destroyed me." "That is a terrible way to live," Maya said gently. "It is the only way I have known how to survive," he admitted. He turned to her. "You are different, Maya. You wear your heart on your sleeve. You fought me for a boy who is not even yours. He is mine in the ways that matter," Maya said. "We take care of each other at Harbor Light. We are a family of leftovers, but we are a family." Adrian shifted, and his knee brushed against hers. A jolt of electricity shot through Maya's leg. She did not pull away. In the confined space of the car, the contact felt monumental. Adrian looked down at where their legs touched, then up at her face. His eyes were dark, searching. He lifted his hand, his fingers hovering just inches from her cheek. Maya held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wanted him to touch her. The realization shocked her, but it was there. a yearning to feel the roughness of his hand against her skin, to bridge the gap between her world of broken toys and his world of broken power. The car slowed, turning a corner sharply. "We have arrived, miss," the driver's voice came over the intercom, shattering the moment. Adrian's hand dropped. He pulled back, the mask sliding back into place, though his eyes remained heated. "Tomorrow," he said. "I will come to the orphanage tomorrow to finalize the grant and to see him." "Tomorrow," Maya agreed, her voice breathless. The next day, the sun struggled to break through the gray clouds over Greyhaven. The orphanage was buzzing with the news of the successful meeting, though Maya had kept the details vague, attributing the success to the mysterious donor's generosity rather than any personal connection. She found Eli in the recreation room, sitting at a small table with a box of crayons. He was drawing with frantic energy, pressing down so hard that the wax crumbled on the paper. "Hey, bud," Maya said, sitting down across from him. "What are you making?" Eli did not look up, but he slid the paper toward her. It was a drawing of a house, not the blocky, square houses most children drew, but a sprawling structure with towers and a high gate. He had colored it gray and black, and next to the house, he had drawn blue, wavy lines. Water. Maya's stomach flipped. Adrian's mansion sat on a cliff overlooking the river. The resemblance was eerie. "That is a big house." "Eli," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "Have you been there?" Eli shrugged, his small shoulders hunched. He picked up a black crayon and started scribbling over the windows, barring them out. "Big house," he whispered. "Daddy's house." Maya reached out and covered his hand with hers. He stopped scribbling and looked at her, his eyes full of a sorrow that no 9-year-old should know. "It is okay," she said. "It is a beautiful drawing." At 2 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Sister Joan was in a flutter, straightening her habit and ordering the older children to tuck in their shirts. Adrian entered the orphanage, not as the terrifying figure from the night before, but as a polished philanthropist. He wore a light gray suit, no tie, looking approachable yet undeniably wealthy. But Maya saw the tension in his neck, the way his eyes immediately scanned the room, ignoring the peeling paint and the smell of boiled cabbage. "Mr. Moretti, welcome to Harbor Light," Sister Joan gushed, extending her hand. "We are so grateful." "Sister," Adrian said, shaking her hand briefly, "the pleasure is mine." His eyes found Maya standing near the back wall. He gave her a subtle nod, an acknowledgement of their secret pact. Then, his gaze drifted lower, past the crowd of curious children, until it landed on the beanbag chair in the corner. Eli was there, reading a comic book. Adrian went perfectly still, the color drained from his face, leaving him pale beneath his tan. He took a step forward, his breath hitching audibly. Eli looked up. For a second, there was no recognition, just a boy looking at a stranger, and then something clicked. Eli's eyes went wide. His comic book slipped from his fingers. He went rigid, his whole body seizing up in a posture of absolute terror. He scrambled backward, knocking over a plastic chair, and bolted. He ran straight to Maya, ducking behind her legs, burying his face in her skirt. "No, no, no," Eli whimpered, his voice muffled by the fabric. The room went silent. Sister Joan looked confused. The other children stared. Adrian stood frozen in the center of the room. He looked as if someone had stabbed him. He raised a hand as if to reach out, but stopped himself. He remembered Maya's warning. "Do not scare him." "I am sorry," Sister Joan said nervously, stepping between them. "Eli is very shy with visitors. It is fine," Adrian choked out. His voice was thick with suppressed tears. He forced himself to look away from his son, to look at Sister Joan. "I understand." He spent the next hour touring the facility, but his heart was clearly not in it. He asked questions about the heating, the food budget, the medical supplies, but every few minutes, he would ask something else. "And the intake forms?" he asked Sister Joan as they stood in the hallway. "For the children who arrive without parents, how is that handled?" Sister Joan stiffened. Her smile became tight. "Oh, it is all very standard. We work with the city." "May I see the files?" Adrian asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. just to understand the demographics we are supporting, specifically for the boy." "Eli?" Sister Joan laughed nervously, waving her hand. "Oh, confidentiality laws are very strict, Mr. Moretti. Even for donors, it is complicated. We have to protect the children's privacy." Maya, standing a few feet away, felt a cold prickle on the back of her neck. Sister Joan was usually transparent about the orphanage's struggles. Her evasiveness was out of character. Maya looked at Adrian and saw that he had noticed it too. His jaw was set, his eyes narrowing slightly as he assessed the nun. When the tour was over, Adrian walked toward the exit. The rain had started again, a light, misty drizzle that coated the world in gray. "Miss Ellis." "Walk me to my car?" Adrian asked. "Of course," Maya said. They stepped outside, away from the prying ears of the staff. As soon as the heavy oak door clicked shut behind them, Adrian turned to her. "He recognized me," Adrian said, his voice raw. "Did you see that? He knew who I was. He was scared," Maya said honestly. "But yes, he knew you." Adrian ran a hand over his face, wiping away the rain. God, seeing him like that, hiding from me. It killed me. "Maya, he needs time," she said, stepping closer to him. "He's been through so much. But he is safe here. And now you know where he is." Adrian looked at her. The despair in his eyes shifted, replaced by a fierce intensity. "I do not like the way the director answered my questions." "I know," Maya said quietly. She was acting strange. Usually she complains about the paperwork. Today she acted like it was a state secret. "Something is wrong here," Adrian said. "The police report, the lack of a paper trail, the way she deflected. Someone is hiding him. Maya, this was not an accident." He reached out and took her hand. His grip was strong, desperate, his large fingers enveloping hers. The heat of his skin was shocking against the damp chill of the afternoon. "You are the only person I trust with this," he said, his voice low and rough. "I cannot trust the police. I cannot trust the system, and I am starting to think I cannot trust this place, but I trust you." Maya looked down at their joined hands, then up into his eyes. She felt a hot jolt of awareness zip through her body, a mixture of fear and attraction that made her knees weak. She was conspiring with a mafia boss. She was lying to her boss. She was walking a razor's edge, and she had never felt more alive. "I will find out what she is hiding," Maya promised. "I will find his file." Adrian squeezed her hand one last time, a touch that lingered for a second too long, full of unspoken promises. "Be careful, Maya," he whispered. He let go and turned to his car. Maya stood in the rain, watching him drive away, her hand still burning where he had touched her, knowing that she had just crossed a line from which there was no return. The archives room at Harbor Light Home was less of a library and more of a graveyard for paperwork. It was a windowless closet in the basement, smelling of damp cardboard and dust that had settled over decades of forgotten childhoods. Maya sat on an overturned milk crate, a single bare bulb buzzing overhead like an angry hornet. It had been 3 days since Adrian Moretti had gripped her hand in the rain, 3 days of stealing moments between shift changes to dig for the truth. Maya pulled the heavy binder labeled Intake, Year 2020 from the shelf. Her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. She was looking for the month of May, the month Eli had been found by the police wandering near the rail yards. She found the log sheet. There it was, written in Sister Joan's neat, cramped handwriting, John Doe, Eli, approx, age 9, found by Officer Miller. No ID, nonverbal. Maya turned the page, expecting to see the standard intake forms, medical assessments, police reports, the mandatory psychological evaluation. There was nothing. The jagged edge of a torn page stared back at her. Someone had ripped the documentation right out of the binding. Maya felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She turned to the computer terminal on the desk, an ancient machine that hummed loudly. She logged into the secure server. Typing in the administrative password she had peered over Sister Joan's shoulder to memorize months ago. She navigated to the digital folder labeled Intake Photos. Every child who entered Harbor Light was photographed for identification. It was standard procedure. She clicked on the folder named Eli. The screen blinked. Folder empty, 0 KB. Maya stared at the glowing monitor. Files did not just disappear. Pages did not tear themselves out of binders. This was not bureaucratic incompetence. It was a surgical removal of a human being's history. Someone had scrubbed Eli's existence clean before he had even settled into his bunk. Across the city, in a glass-walled office that overlooked the glittering skyline of Greyhaven, Adrian Moretti was conducting an excavation of a different kind. He stood by the window, watching the city lights, while his chief financial investigator, a balding man named Silas with nervous eyes, sat at the conference table surrounded by spreadsheets. "I have found the connection," Silas said, his voice quiet. Adrian turned. "Speak. You wanted to know about the donor list for Harbor Light," Silas said, tapping a paper. "Most of it is small time, local churches, bake sales, a few tax write-offs for small businesses. But there is a recurring monthly donation of $5,000 coming from a company called Bright Horizons Logistics." "I do not know them," Adrian said. "You would not," Silas replied. "They do not actually move any freight. It is a shell company. I traced the registration through 3 different holding firms in Delaware and the Caymans. It all loops back to a private trust managed by a law firm on 4th Street. "Who owns the trust?" Adrian asked, his voice low. Silas hesitated, then pushed the paper forward. "Vincent Hale." Adrian felt a muscle in his jaw jump. Vincent Hale, the city councilman with the perfect smile and the campaign posters plastered on every bus stop. The man who kissed babies and promised to clean up the streets. While everyone in the underworld knew he took a cut of every illicit shipment that moved through the docks. "Hale?" Adrian repeated, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "He's on the board of the trust," Silas explained. "And Bright Horizons is not just donating to the orphanage. They are making specific payments earmarked for administrative processing." Adrian looked out at the city again. Hale was sloppy, or perhaps just arrogant. If Hale was paying the orphanage, he owned someone there. And if he owned someone there, he knew about Luca. "Get the car," Adrian said, grabbing his jacket. They met an hour later at the Rusty Anchor, a small dive cafe near the waterfront that smelled of fried onions and strong coffee. It was neutral ground, far from the prying eyes of Adrian's associates or Maya's colleagues. They slid into a corner booth that was designed for 2 teenagers, not 2 adults. It was a tight fit. As Adrian sat down, his long legs brushed against Maya's under the table. She flinched instinctively, then settled. He did not move his leg away. The contact was a constant, warm pressure that made it difficult for Maya to concentrate on the file she was sliding across the laminate table. "They erased him," Maya whispered, keeping her voice low. Her eyes were wide, rimmed with fatigue. "The physical file is torn. The digital photos are gone. It is like he fell out of the sky." "It was not the sky," Adrian said grimly. "It was Vincent Hale." Maya blinked. "The councilman? He's washing money through the orphanage," Adrian explained, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the small booth. "He has a shell company making payments. If he erased Luca's files, it means he knew who the boy was when he arrived. He knew he was my son." "Why would he keep him there?" Maya asked, her brow furrowing. "Why not? Use him against you?" "Leverage," Adrian said. "Or insurance. If I ever moved against Hale's territory, he could produce the boy. Or perhaps he just wanted to enjoy the fact that he had my son sleeping on a cot in a state facility while I tore the world apart looking for him." He reached out, his hand covering hers on the table. His skin was rough, his grip firm. "We are getting him out," he said. "Soon." Maya looked at their joined hands. The anger in Adrian's voice was terrifying, but his touch was incredibly gentle. It was a dichotomy she was struggling to reconcile. "The monster and the father. We need more proof," she said. "If we move now, Hale could panic. He could move Eli again. We need to find the link between Hale and Sister Joan. We need to know who physically erased those files. We work together," Adrian said. "I press from the outside. You watch from the inside." He shifted in the booth, and his knee pressed harder against hers. Maya looked up, locking eyes with him. The cafe noise, the clatter of plates, the hiss of the espresso machine seemed to fade. There was just the heat of his leg, the intensity of his steel gray eyes, and the secret that bound them together. "Be careful, Maya," he murmured. "Hale is not a man who leaves loose ends." 2 nights later, the lines between professional conspiracy and personal entanglement blurred completely. Maya was at Adrian's penthouse. It was a sprawling apartment at the top of a glass needle in the center of the Heights, decorated in cold chrome and black leather. It was beautiful, but it felt empty, devoid of warmth. She was perched on a stool at the marble kitchen island, files spread out around her. It was past midnight. Outside, the city was a grid of golden lights. Inside, the only sound was the kettle boiling. Adrian was making tea. The sight of him, this powerful, dangerous man, carefully measuring loose-leaf tea into a strainer, was disarming. He had discarded his suit jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He placed a steaming mug in front of her. "Chamomile," he said. "You look like you have not slept in a week." "I keep seeing shadows," Maya admitted, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. "Every time a car slows down near the orphanage, I think it is Hale's men." "You are safe," Adrian said. "I have shadows of my own watching you. You just do not see them. That does not make me feel better." "Adrian," she said, looking down into her tea. He walked around the island and stood next to her. He was close. Too close. Maya could smell the soap on his skin and the faint metallic scent of the night air that clung to him. "What are you afraid of?" he asked softly. "Hale?" "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She looked up at him. "I am afraid of this, of being here. I am a social worker, Adrian. I fix broken toys. I help children find homes. I do not sit in penthouses plotting with men like you. Men like me?" Adrian's expression tightened slightly. "Criminals?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I am terrified that if I stay in your orbit too long, I will get tainted," she confessed, the words rushing out, "that I will start thinking the ends justify the means, that I will forget who I am." Adrian reached out. His hand moved slowly, giving her ample time to pull away. She didn't. He brushed a stray lock of hair away from her face, tucking it behind her ear. His fingers lingered there, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. His skin was warm, his touch electric. "You are the most decent thing that has walked into my life in 10 years, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You could walk through hell and come out clean, Maya. I would not let the soot touch you." Maya's breath hitched. She looked at his mouth. She saw the longing there, raw and unguarded. The air between them grew heavy, charged with a magnetic pull that defied logic. Adrian leaned in slowly, his eyes searching hers for permission. Maya did not retreat. She tilted her chin up, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. When their lips met, it was not an explosion. It was a slow, searching slide into warmth. Adrian tasted of tea and danger. His mouth was soft, surprisingly so, moving against hers with a hesitant tenderness that made her knees weak. Maya let out a small, soft sound, and Adrian took it as an invitation. The kiss deepened. His hand slid from her jaw down the curve of her neck, settling on her lower back. He pulled her gently toward him until her knees bumped against his thighs. For a moment, Maya forgot about Hale, about the orphanage, about the gun she knew he kept in the drawer by the door. She only felt the strength of his arm around her waist and the desperate way he was kissing her, as if she were oxygen and he had been holding his breath for years. She found herself leaning in, her hands rising to grip the fabric of his shirt. Then reality crashed back in. She was kissing a mob boss. She was kissing the father of her client. She was losing herself. Maya pulled back, gasping for air. She pushed gently against his chest. "Adrian, stop." She breathed. He released her instantly. He stepped back, his chest heaving, his eyes dark and blown wide. He ran a hand through his hair, looking as shaken as she felt. "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have—" "No," Maya said, hopping off the stool. Her legs felt like jelly. "I have to go. I cannot do this. Not while everything is so messy." She gathered her purse, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. "Maya," Adrian started, taking a step toward her. "Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Please, just let me go home." He let her go. Later, in her own small, quiet apartment. Maya sat on the edge of her bed. She touched her lips. They still tingled. She felt a profound sense of shame for wanting him, warring with a deep, aching loneliness. She remembered the tremor in his voice when he said she was decent. She hated that she understood him. She hated that she wanted to run back to the penthouse and finish what they started, while Maya wrestled with her conscience. Vincent Hale was sitting in the back of a private club, surrounded by smoke and expensive liquor. He held a phone to his ear, listening to a report from one of his spotters. "Moretti has been digging," the voice on the line said. "He has pulled property records, and the woman, the social worker, Ellis, she's been asking questions about the file archives." Hale took a slow sip of his bourbon. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We cannot have that," he said smoothly. "If Moretti finds the boy, I lose my leverage. And if the girl talks, I lose my reputation. What do you want us to do?" "Scare her," Hale said. "Do not touch her yet. Just put some pressure on. Let her know she is being watched. Make her understand that curiosity is a dangerous habit." 2 nights later, Maya clocked out at midnight. The rain had returned, slicking the streets of Grey Haven with oil and water. She got into her car. The battery had been replaced, courtesy of an anonymous mechanic she suspected Adrian had paid for, and pulled onto the main road. The streets were empty. She drove for 5 minutes before she noticed the headlights in her rearview mirror, a gray sedan. It was staying exactly 3 car lengths behind her. Maya turned right. The sedan turned right. She turned left, circling the block. The sedan followed. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at her skin. She reached for her phone, her fingers fumbling. She dialed the number she had sworn she wouldn't use unless it was an emergency. Adrian picked up on the first ring. "Maya? Someone is following me," she said, her voice high and tight. "I am on 4th Street, a gray sedan. It has been there for 10 minutes. Stay on the line," Adrian commanded. His voice changed instantly, sharp, alert, deadly. "Keep driving. Do not stop. Where are you heading?" "Toward the bridge," she said. "I am 2 minutes away. Keep moving. Do not let them box you in." Maya gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The gray sedan sped up, closing the gap. It came right up to her bumper, its high beams blinding her in the mirror. It bumped her car, a gentle tap, but enough to send a jolt through her spine. "They hit me," she cried out. "Hold on, Maya. I see you." In her side mirror, she saw a burst of motion. A massive black SUV roared out of a side street, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic. It swerved violently, placing itself directly between Maya's car and the gray sedan. The SUV slammed on its brakes. The gray sedan screeched, tires smoking on the wet pavement, swerving wildly to avoid a collision. It spun out, mounting the curb and crashing into a row of trash cans. Maya slammed on her brakes, her car skidding to a halt 50 feet away. The door of the SUV flew open. Adrian jumped out. He didn't even look at the other car. He ran toward her. He ripped her door open. "Maya!" She was shaking so hard she couldn't unbuckle her seatbelt. Adrian reached across her, his movements efficient and calm, and clicked the buckle release. He pulled her out of the car and into his arms. "I have got you," he said into her ear. "I have got you." He practically carried her to his SUV, shoving her into the passenger seat before rounding the hood and jumping in. As he peeled away, leaving her car and the wrecked sedan behind, Maya looked back. The gray car was reversing, fleeing into the night. They did not go to the penthouse, too exposed. Adrian had said, they went to a townhouse in the old district, a nondescript brownstone with reinforced doors and bulletproof glass. Inside, it was warm, filled with heavy furniture and the smell of cedar. Maya sat on the velvet sofa, her hands still trembling uncontrollably. The adrenaline crash was hitting her hard. She felt cold, nauseous and terrified. Adrian locked the door and engaged the security system. He walked over to her, shedding his jacket. He sat down and pulled her into him. This time, she did not pull away. She collapsed against him, burying her face in the curve of his neck. She could hear his heart beating, a steady, powerful thud that grounded her. "I hate this," she mumbled into his shirt. "I hate that I need this. I hate that I need you to protect me. I know," Adrian murmured, his arms tightening around her. He rested his chin on the top of her head. "I am sorry they came for you. I should have anticipated it." She pulled back slightly, looking at him. His eyes were dark with guilt. "It is not your fault," she said, surprising herself. "It is Hale. It is my world," Adrian corrected, "and you are stuck in it because of me." They sat like that for a long time, the silence of the safe house wrapping around them. The fear began to recede, replaced by that familiar, dangerous heat. Being in his arms felt inevitable. It felt like the only safe place left in the city. Eventually, Adrian stood up. "You should sleep," he said. "The guest room is at the top of the stairs. I will stay down here and watch the monitors." Maya stood up. She felt unmoored. She didn't want to be alone in a strange room. She wanted to stay on the sofa. She wanted him. She walked to the stairs, but paused in the doorway. Adrian was watching her, his expression guarded. "Adrian," she said. He walked over to her, stopping a foot away. He looked like he was fighting a war inside his own head. "I promised you," he said, his voice rough. "I promised I would not cross any line you did not want. You are vulnerable right now. You are scared. I am not going to take advantage of that." He was being noble. He was being good. And it was driving her crazy. Maya looked at his mouth. She remembered the taste of him from the kitchen. She remembered the feeling of his hand on her back. "I am not scared of you," she whispered. She stepped forward. She saw his eyes drop to her lips, saw the resolve in his face crumble. Maya stood on her tiptoes and pressed her mouth to his. This kiss was not slow. It was fierce. It was a collision of fear and desire. Maya grabbed the lapels of his shirt, pulling him down, and Adrian made a low, guttural sound in his throat, his arms wrapped around her, lifting her slightly off the floor, crushing her against his chest. For 10 seconds, they burned. It was a kiss that promised everything: passion, destruction, salvation. Then Maya broke it. She pulled back, gasping, her lips swollen and stinging. If she stayed 1 second longer, she wouldn't make it to the guest room. She saw the same realization in Adrian's eyes. He looked wrecked. "Good night." "Adrian," she whispered. She turned and ran up the stairs, closing the guest room door behind her. She leaned against the wood, her heart hammering, her body aching with a want so sharp it felt like a wound. Downstairs, in the hallway, Adrian stood motionless, staring at the empty staircase, his hands balled into fists, listening to the silence of the house and the roar of his own blood. The morning sun did little to warm the safe house kitchen, where Adrian sat with a phone pressed to his ear, his expression growing darker by the second. Maya, stirring instant coffee in a mug she'd found in the cupboard, watched him. She had barely slept, the ghost of their kiss on the stairs lingering like a fever dream. "I see," Adrian said. His voice clipped. "Send the address to my secure line and dig deeper into the board members. I want names, addresses, and dirty laundry." He hung up and looked at Maya. "We have a lead," he said. "My team traced the original intake number for Eli before it was scrubbed from the Harbor Light system. It originated from an agency called Bright Horizons Placement." Maya frowned. "I remember them. They shut down 3 years ago. There was a huge scandal about lost paperwork and mishandled state funds. It was not just paperwork," Adrian said, standing up and grabbing his jacket. "It was a cover. The agency was quietly dissolved, but the assets were transferred to a holding company controlled by one of Vincent Hale's associates." He walked over to the counter, his presence suddenly filling the small space. "Get dressed," he said. "We are going to the city archives." The city archives was a brutalist concrete building downtown, smelling of mildew and bureaucracy. Adrian's influence, and a generous donation to the clerk's retirement fund got them into the restricted storage levels where the defunct agency records were kept in towering, dusty stacks. For 3 hours, they worked in silence, pulling boxes labeled Bright Horizons. The dust motes danced in the flickering fluorescent light. "Here," Maya whispered, pulling a folder. "Look at this." She spread a series of intake forms on the metal table. 5 children, she said, pointing to the names. All processed through Bright Horizons in 2021. All of them transferred to Harbor Light for temporary holding, and then... "Look at the transfer logs." Adrian leaned over her shoulder, his chest brushing her back. She tried to ignore the contact. "Private placement." He read aloud, "Expedited. There is no destination listed," Maya said, her voice trembling with anger. "Just private placement, and look at the bank ledger, stapled to the back." On the same day, each child was transferred out. A donation of $50,000 was made to Bright Horizons from an anonymous LLC. They were selling them. Adrian said. The realization was a low growl in his throat, or renting them out. Moving children through the system like cargo to avoid scrutiny. And Eli was one of them, Maya said, tears pricking her eyes. She found a fragmented log with the date matching Eli's disappearance from Adrian's life. Mail. Approx 4. Intake, Bright Horizons. Transfer, pending. It stopped there. This is how Hale operates, Adrian said, slamming the folder shut. He uses the chaos of the foster system to hide his tracks. He knew I was looking for Luca, so he buried him in a pile of paperwork and moved him around until the trail went cold. They drove back to Harbor Light in a tense silence. Maya felt sick. The building she had dedicated her life to, the place she thought was a sanctuary, had been used as a way station for something monstrous. When they arrived, Maya stormed straight to the director's office, ignoring Adrian's warning to wait. She threw the door open. Sister Joan looked up from her desk, startled. "Maya, you are late for your shift. Tell me about Bright Horizons," Maya demanded, slamming her hand on the desk. The color drained from the nun's face. She looked from Maya to Adrian, who stood in the doorway, radiating a terrifying, silent menace. I do not know what you mean," Sister Joan stammered. "Stop lying," Maya shouted, her voice cracking. "We saw the records, Joan, the transfers, the money. Did you know? Did you know they were selling kids?" Sister Joan crumbled. She put her face in her hands and began to weep. "I didn't know about the money." She sobbed. "I swear, Maya, Hale's men, they came to me years ago. They said they had children who needed emergency placement, children who fell through the cracks. They said if I didn't take them, the city would cut our funding. They threatened to shut us down." "So you just took them?" Adrian's voice was like ice. "You took them and you asked no questions when they disappeared? I thought I was saving them," Sister Joan cried. "They told me the children were going to specialized private homes. I thought I was doing the right thing to keep the orphanage open. You sold my son to keep the lights on," Adrian said. He stepped into the room. The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at the nun with a hatred so pure it was almost blinding. "Adrian, no," Maya warned, stepping between them. He ignored her. He walked toward the desk, his hands clenching into fists. "I am going to find Hale," he said, his voice vibrating with rage, "and I am going to make him feel every second of fear my son felt. I am going to tear his life apart piece by piece until he begs me for death." He turned to leave, his movement violent and abrupt. "Adrian!" Maya grabbed the front of his shirt with both hands. Planting her feet, he stopped, looking down at her, his eyes wild. "Let go!" "Maya, no!" she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You cannot do this. You cannot start a war in the streets. Think about Eli. If you go after Hale now, if you start killing people, Hale will use Eli as a shield. Or worse, he will make him disappear for good. I have to do something," Adrian roared, the sound echoing off the office walls. He looked at the ceiling, his chest heaving. "He stole 4 years of my life. Be better than him." Maya shook him, her grip tightening on his lapels. "Be the father Eli needs, not the monster Hale thinks you are. If you turn this into a bloodbath, you prove everyone right about you. You prove that you are just a violent criminal." Show Eli that you are different." Adrian looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the fierce, unyielding belief. She was fighting for his soul, even when he was ready to surrender it to the darkness. The rage inside him didn't vanish, but it shifted, colliding with the desperate need he felt for the woman standing in front of him. The argument spiraled into something else. The proximity, the high emotions, the shared terror, it all ignited. Adrian grabbed her wrists, not to push her away, but to hold her. He pulled her against him, his control snapping. Maya didn't pull back. She made a sound, half sob, half gasp, and then his mouth was on hers. It was an angry kiss, desperate and bruising. It tasted of salt and fury. Maya responded with equal intensity, her hands sliding up to cup his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. They stumbled backward, Adrian pressing her until her back hit the wall next to the bookshelf. He groaned against her mouth, his hands sliding down to her waist, splaying over her hips, pulling her flush against his hard body. Maya felt the gun in his holster press against her side, a stark reminder of who he was. But she didn't care. She felt alive, terrified, and consumed all at once. She pushed gently at his chest, breaking the kiss. They stood there, panting, foreheads resting against each other. "I can't," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. Adrian froze. He pulled his hands back slowly, though he didn't step away. "I am sorry," he rasped. "It is not that I don't want to," Maya admitted, her face flushed. "It is just—" "You scare me, Adrian. Not because I think you will hurt me, but because of what you are capable of doing to others. I can't love a man who solves his problems with a gun." Adrian closed his eyes. He leaned his head back against the wall, exposing his throat. "You are the first person," he said quietly, "who has ever made me want to put the gun down. Not for appearances, not to look legitimate for the board, but for real." He opened his eyes and looked at her. "I want to be the man you think I can be. Then let's do this the right way," Maya said, wiping her face. "No killing. We get evidence. We get the feds. We take Hale down legally." Adrian let out a long breath. "Okay, the right way." They left the orphanage and went back to the penthouse to regroup. Adrian made a call to a contact he hadn't spoken to in years, Agent Miller, a federal officer who had been a childhood friend of Adrian's older brother before their paths diverged. Miller was skeptical but agreed to look at what they had. Over the next 2 days, the investigation deepened. They found a paper trail leading from Bright Horizons to a private foster home in the suburbs, run by a woman named Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable is on Hale's payroll as a consultant, Adrian said, looking at the bank records on his laptop. They drove to the address listed for Mrs. Gable. It was an empty lot. The house had been demolished months ago. "He moved him," Adrian said, staring at the rubble. "He had Luca here for a while, and then he moved him back to Harbor Light when the heat died down. He's been shuffling him back and forth, keeping him close enough to monitor, but mobile enough to hide. That means Hale is keeping him as leverage," Maya realized with a chill. "He knows you are watching. He's waiting for you to make a move so he can use the boy against you." The realization made the stakes infinitely higher. They weren't just looking for a lost child. They were playing a chess game where a 9-year-old was the king, and Hale was ready to flip the board. The countermove came sooner than they expected. The next morning, Maya arrived at Harbor Light to find a news van parked outside. Reporters were swarming the steps. She fought her way through the crowd, confused. A microphone was shoved in her face. "Miss Ellis, is it true you have been embezzling donations? Miss Ellis, comments on the allegations that you have been grooming children for private buyers." Maya pushed past them, her heart hammering. She burst into the office. Sister Joan was sitting there, pale and shaking, holding a newspaper. She silently handed it to Maya. The headline screamed, "Orphanage Scandal, Senior Social Worker Linked to Funding Fraud." The article was a masterpiece of lies. It claimed an anonymous source had provided evidence that Maya Ellis was diverting donor funds into her personal accounts and was under investigation for falsifying child welfare reports. It painted her as the architect of the very corruption she was trying to expose. "You are suspended." Maya, Sister Joan whispered, the board called this morning. Pending an investigation. You have to leave the premises. But this is Hale, Maya cried. He's doing this to discredit me. I know, Sister Joan said, tears streaming down her face. But I have no power here. Please, Maya, go, before the police arrive. Maya stumbled out the back door, numb with shock. She had lost her job. Her reputation was in tatters. She couldn't protect Eli anymore. She didn't go home. She went to the only place she felt safe. When Adrian opened the penthouse door, Maya fell into his arms. She was sobbing, deep, wrenching sounds of devastation. He has taken everything. She wept against his chest. I can't help Eli. I can't go back. They think I am a criminal. Adrian held her tight, kicking the door shut. He wrapped his arms around her, one hand cradling the back of her head, pressing her face into his shoulder. He murmured, rocking her gently. I have got you. He ruined me. Adrian. He's trying to isolate us, Adrian said, his voice low and dangerous, though his touch remained tender. He wants to separate you from the boy. He wants to break you, so I will act rashly. He led her to the massive leather sofa and sat down, pulling her into his lap. Maya curled up, burying her face in his neck, seeking comfort in his warmth. I will fix this, Adrian promised. I will make the calls. I will get the best lawyers. Don't do anything illegal, she begged, pulling back to look at him with tear-stained eyes. Please, Adrian, if you go to prison, Eli has no one. Promise me. I promise, he said, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I will handle it, but you need to rest. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke over the city. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, thunder rattling the glass. Maya, exhausted by grief and crying, eventually fell asleep on the couch. Her hand was still clutching Adrian's shirt. Adrian didn't move for a long time. He sat there in the dim light, listening to the storm and the soft rhythm of Maya's breathing. He looked down at her face, relaxed in sleep, looking so young and vulnerable. He felt a tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with anger. It was a terrifying tenderness. He had spent his life building walls, becoming the ruthless businessman, the cold-blooded operator that Greyhaven respected and feared. He had convinced himself he didn't need softness. But looking at Maya, he realized he would burn the world down to keep her safe, and that terrified him more than any gun pointed at his head. He carefully extricated himself, tucking a cashmere throw blanket around her shoulders. He walked to the window and looked out at the rain-slicked city. He pulled out his phone and dialed Agent Miller. It is me, Adrian said quietly. Hale just made his move. He framed the girl. We need to accelerate the timeline. I am ready to give you everything, the accounts, the names, the shell companies. There was a pause on the line. You know what that means? Adrian, Miller said. If you give us the books on the syndicate to get to Hale, you are implicating yourself. You will have to do time. I know, Adrian said, looking back at the sleeping woman on his couch. But I need a deal. Immunity for the boy and Maya, and a reduced sentence for me. I want to be able to see my son grow up. Miller. Even if it is through a visitation glass for a few years, I will see what I can do, Miller said. Adrian hung up. He walked back to the couch and sat on the floor beside Maya's head. He reached out and lightly touched her hair. I will take care of it, he whispered into the darkness, whatever it costs. The safe house sat on a jagged bluff an hour north of Greyhaven, a modern structure of cedar and reinforced glass that stared out at the churning gray Atlantic. It was beautiful, isolated, and fortified like a bunker. Adrian had moved Maya there under the cover of darkness, driving the SUV himself while a convoy of 2 other vehicles flanked them. The silence in the car had been heavy, the weight of the suspension and the scandal hanging over Maya like a lead blanket. But once they crossed the perimeter, Adrian had made a call. Maya had heard him speaking to his lieutenants, his voice low and terrifyingly calm. She is with me, he had said. Put the word out. The girl is off limits. Anyone who looks at her wrong, anyone who tries to sell her location to Hale, answers to me directly. And tell them I am not in a forgiving mood. The message rippled through the city's underworld before the sun came up. In the dive bars and the back rooms where deals were made, the order was clear. Maya Ellis was protected by the full, violent weight of the Moretti organization. To touch her was suicide. For the first few days, the isolation was jarring. Maya, used to the constant noise of the orphanage and the city, found the silence of the coast unsettling. But there was a strange, suspended peace in it, too. The world had narrowed down to this house, the ocean and Adrian. They fell into a rhythm born of necessity. The massive kitchen island became their command center. By day, it was covered in stacks of files, laptop computers, and legal pads covered in Maya's neat handwriting and Adrian's sharp scrawl. They worked side by side, cross-referencing the data from the archives with the financial records Adrian's team was pulling from the dark web. By evening, the dynamic shifted. "You are burning the garlic," Maya said one night, leaning against the counter with a glass of red wine in her hand. "I am caramelizing it," Adrian corrected, not looking up from the pan where he was sautéing vegetables. "There is a difference." "You cook like you run a business," she teased, a small smile touching her lips, very aggressive with the spatula. Adrian glanced at her, and the tension that constantly knotted his shoulders seemed to loosen. "If you do not like it, you can eat a sandwich." "I did not say I did not like it," she said softly. "It smells like home." They ate on the deck, wrapped in heavy wool blankets against the biting sea wind, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below filling the silence. They talked about the case, about Hale, about Eli, but they also talked about other things. Adrian spoke of his childhood, of the pressure of being the heir to a criminal legacy he never really wanted. Maya spoke of the children she had failed to save, the ghosts that haunted her. In the quiet of the safe house, the lines between them blurred. He was not just a mob boss, he was a man who made sure she had her favorite tea. She was not just a social worker, she was the partner who kept him grounded when his rage threatened to boil over. On the fourth evening, the breakthrough came. They were in the living room, a fire crackling in the stone hearth. Adrian's laptop pinged with a secure notification. "It is Miller," Adrian said, opening the file. "He got it. The decryption key for Hale's private ledger." Maya rushed to the sofa, sitting next to him as the spreadsheet populated the screen. Rows and rows of transactions appeared. "Look," she said, pointing at the screen. "Bright Horizons, Harbor Light, Gable Foster Care. It is all here. Adrian, the dates, the amounts, and the payoffs," Adrian added, his eyes scanning the data. "Payments to city judges, payments to the zoning commissioner. And here, a direct wire transfer to Vincent Hale's personal offshore account, dated 3 days after Luca disappeared. This is it," Maya breathed, leaning back against the cushions. "This connects him to everything. The kidnapping, the fraud, the trafficking. It is enough to put him away for life." Adrian closed the laptop, a look of profound relief washing over his face. He rubbed his temples. "We have him," Maya laughed, a sound of pure release. She jumped up and ran to the kitchen. "We have to celebrate. Where is that champagne you brought?" She found the bottle in the fridge and popped the cork, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged room. She poured 2 glasses, her hands shaking slightly with excitement. "To truth," she said. Walking back to him and holding out a glass, Adrian stood up, taking the flute. He looked at her, his eyes dark and intense in the firelight. "To the woman who found it." They clinked glasses. Maya took a sip, but she was laughing, giddy with the adrenaline of the victory. As she lowered the glass, her hand jerked, and champagne sloshed over the rim, splashing onto her white shirt. "Oh no," she gasped, looking down at the wet stain spreading across her chest. "I am so clumsy." "Here," Adrian said. He grabbed a linen napkin from the table. He stepped closer, reaching out to dab at the liquid on her collarbone. Maya stopped moving. Adrian's hand was gentle, the cloth pressing against her skin, but as he wiped the spill, his knuckles grazed the curve of her neck. His fingers lingered, warm and rough against the delicate skin of her throat. The laughter died in Maya's throat. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, thick with a tension that had been building for days, maybe weeks. She looked up. Adrian was not looking at the stain anymore. He was looking at her face. His eyes were dilated, focused on her mouth. His hand stopped moving, resting against her collarbone, his thumb brushing slowly back and forth against her pulse point. Maya's breath hitched. She could feel the steady thud of her own heart beating against his hand. "Adrian," she whispered. He didn't pull away. He stepped closer, intruding into her space, his body radiating heat. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Tell me to stop, Maya, and I will walk away right now." Maya looked at him, the scars on his face, the danger in his eyes, and the terrifying, beautiful vulnerability underneath. She thought of the way he had protected her, the way he looked at his son's picture, the way he had cooked dinner with such focus. She didn't want him to stop. She dropped her champagne glass. It hit the thick rug with a dull thud, not breaking but rolling away unnoticed. She leaned in. Adrian met her halfway. The kiss was not tentative. It was an explosion. It was the breaking of a dam that had been holding back weeks of fear and desire. Adrian groaned against her mouth, a sound of hunger and relief. He dropped the napkin and framed her face with both hands, tilting her head back to deepen the angle. Maya's hands flew to his chest, gripping the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. She opened to him, tasting the champagne and the fire. He moved his hands down to her waist and lifted her effortlessly. Maya gasped as he set her onto the edge of the kitchen island, stepping between her knees. The height difference vanished. She wrapped her legs around him, pulling him flush against her. It was frantic, messy, and perfect. Adrian's hands were everywhere, in her hair, on her back, sliding down to her hips. He kissed her jaw, her neck, the spot where the champagne had spilled, making her arch her back with a sharp intake of breath. But even in the heat of it, he was careful. He pulled back for a second, his forehead resting against hers, his breathing ragged. "Are you sure?" he rasped, his eyes searching hers, looking for any sign of hesitation. "I am sure," Maya breathed, her hands sliding up his neck to tangle in his dark hair. "I want you." That was all he needed. He kissed her again, fiercely, picking her up off the counter. Maya wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder as he carried her out of the living room. They stumbled into the bedroom, illuminated only by the moonlight filtering through the sheer curtains. Adrian lowered her onto the bed, following her down, his weight a heavy, grounding comfort. The door clicked shut softly behind them, sealing out the world, the investigation, and the danger. For tonight, there were no mob bosses or social workers. There was only the sound of skin against skin, the murmur of names spoken in the dark, and the desperate, tender collision of two lonely people finally finding a place to land. The morning sun was merciless, bright and white, reflecting off the ocean and flooding the bedroom with light. Maya woke slowly. She was warm. A heavy arm was draped over her waist, holding her pinned to the mattress. She turned her head. Adrian was asleep beside her, in repose. The hardness of his face was gone. He looked younger. The lines of stress around his eyes smoothed out. The sheet had slipped down to his waist, revealing the map of his life written on his skin. There was a puckered scar on his shoulder, a bullet wound, old and healed. Another long, thin white line ran down his ribs. Violence was etched into him. Maya reached out, tracing the scar on his shoulder with her fingertip. Adrian stirred. His eyes opened instantly, alert, before softening as he realized where he was. He caught her hand, bringing her fingers to his lips. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," she whispered. Adrian shifted, propping himself up on one elbow. He looked down at her, his expression turning serious, almost pained. He looked at the scar she had been touching. "You should not have to see this," he said quietly. "You are light, Maya, and I'm terrified that you are going to wake up in an hour and realize you have made a terrible mistake, that you have let a monster into your bed." Maya sat up, pulling the sheet with her. She reached out and cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "I know who you are. Adrian," she said firmly. "I have seen the monster. But I have also seen the man who sat in the rain with me. I have seen the father who would tear the world apart for his son." She leaned in and kissed the scar on his shoulder, then looked back into his eyes. "I am not going anywhere," she said. "What happened last night? It did not just happen. I chose it, and it makes this fight personal now. I am not just fighting for Eli anymore. I am tied to you, to both of you." Adrian looked at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I love you," he whispered, the words sounding like a confession. "I love you too," Maya said. They lay there for a long time, watching the dust motes dance in the sunlight, allowing themselves to believe that maybe, just maybe, there could be a happy ending. The peace was shattered by the ringing of a phone. It was not Adrian's personal cell. It was the burner phone he kept on the nightstand, the one reserved for emergencies. Adrian sat up instantly, the tenderness vanishing, replaced by cold alertness. He answered it. "Moretti." He listened for 10 seconds. His face went gray. His eyes turned into shards of ice. "Send it to me," he said. He hung up. A moment later, a message pinged. "What is it?" Maya asked, feeling a cold dread pool in her stomach. Adrian did not speak. He turned the phone screen toward her. Maya gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. It was a photo. It was taken in a dim, concrete room. In the center of the frame was a wooden chair. Eli sat in the chair. He looked small and terrified. His wrists were bound to the arms of the chair with zip ties. A strip of gray duct tape covered his mouth. His eyes were wide, staring at the camera with a plea that tore through Maya's heart. Scrawled across the bottom of the photo in red marker were 2 words: "Back off." Adrian stood up, naked and terrifying in his rage. He threw the phone onto the bed. "They hit one of my warehouses an hour ago," he said, his voice trembling with the effort to control his volume. "They left the phone on the body of my night watchman." "He has him," Maya whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hale has him. He's trying to trade," Adrian said. "He knows we have the ledger. He knows we are close. He wants me to back off in exchange for the boy." "We cannot give him the ledger," Maya said, wiping her eyes. "If we do, he goes free, and he will never stop. He will keep Eli as insurance forever." "I know," Adrian said. He walked to the window, staring out at the ocean. "I am going to kill him." "No," Maya said, scrambling out of bed and grabbing her robe. "No, Adrian, remember the plan, remember the promise. We do this right." She walked over to him and grabbed his arm. "We use the ledger," she said, "but not to back off. We use it as bait." 2 hours later, the safe house was a war room. Agent Miller had arrived by helicopter, landing on the helipad near the cliffs. He stood with Adrian and Maya around the kitchen island. "We set up a meet," Adrian said, his voice flat and clinical. "I tell Hale I am ready to deal. I trade the ledger for the boy. He will bring muscle," Miller warned. "So will I," Adrian said, "but your team needs to be the perimeter. I want a 5-block radius locked down. No one gets in or out." "The location?" Miller asked. "The old Harbor Light satellite building on the east side." Adrian said, "It has been abandoned for 10 years. It is isolated. Hale used it before. He will feel comfortable there." "And the boy?" Maya asked, her voice shaking. "How do we ensure Eli is safe during the exchange?" "Hale will bring him," Adrian said. He needs to show me the merchandise to get the leverage. As soon as I have visual on Luca." Adrian's hand tightened on the table edge. "As soon as I see him, we move. It is risky," Miller said. "If a firefight breaks out." "We have no choice," Adrian snapped. He sent a photo of my son tied to a chair. "The clock is ticking. We do this tonight." The sun began to set, casting long, blood-red shadows across the water. The team was gearing up. Adrian was dressed in tactical black, checking a handgun with practiced efficiency. He tucked it into the holster beneath his jacket. Maya stood by the sliding glass doors, looking out at the horizon. She was dressed in dark jeans and a heavy jacket. She was coming. Adrian had tried to argue, but she had refused to stay behind. "He trusts me," she had said. "If he is scared, he will need me." Adrian finished checking his weapon and walked over to her. "The helicopter is fueling up," he said. Maya turned to face him. She reached out and took his face in her hands. His skin was cool, his jaw tense. "You have to promise me something," she said. "Anything. You bring him home," she said, "but you come home too." Adrian looked at her. "I will get him, Maya. That is not what I said," she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "I need you to come back alive. Not just for Luca, but for me. I cannot lose you. Adrian, not now." Adrian closed his eyes for a second, leaning his forehead against hers. "I have spent my whole life thinking I was expendable," he whispered, "that as long as the family survived, it did not matter what happened to me. It matters," she said fiercely. "It matters to me." He opened his eyes. They were clear, focused, and filled with love. "Then I will come back," he promised. He kissed her. It was not like the kiss in the kitchen, full of fire and hunger. This was a kiss of desperation, a goodbye that refused to be final. It was tender and terrifyingly sweet. Maya held on to him, memorizing the feel of his shoulders, the scent of him, praying to a God she hadn't spoken to in years that this wouldn't be the last time she touched him. Adrian pulled away, his expression hardening into resolve. "Let's go get our boy," he said. They walked out into the twilight, toward the waiting chopper, the roar of the rotors drowning out the sound of the ocean, flying toward the city and the reckoning that awaited them. The abandoned satellite building of the Harbor Light organization stood like a rotting tooth on the edge of the industrial district. It was a place of broken windows and peeling paint, surrounded by overgrown weeds that rustled in the cold wind coming off the river. The structure had been shuttered for a decade, a victim of budget cuts, and now it loomed in the darkness, a perfect stage for a final act. Adrian Moretti parked the black SUV 100 yards out. He killed the engine. Beside him, Maya Ellis sat in silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. "Stay behind me," Adrian said. His voice was calm, but it was the terrible, flat calmness of a man who had already accepted that he might die. "Keep your head down. When the shooting starts, and it will start, you run for the boy. Do not look at me. Do not look at Hale. You get Eli and you get behind cover." "I understand," Maya whispered. They exited the vehicle. The night air was sharp with the smell of ozone and wet asphalt. Around them, the shadows seemed to deepen, but Maya knew those shadows were inhabited. Adrian's most loyal men, along with Agent Miller's undercover federal team, were moving into position, forming an invisible perimeter around the warehouse. They walked toward the gaping maw of the loading bay entrance. Their footsteps crunched on broken glass, the sound echoing loudly in the stillness. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and dim, lit by a single portable floodlight that cast long, harsh shadows against the graffiti-stained walls. In the center of the room, Vincent Hale waited. The councilman looked out of place in his expensive camel hair coat and polished shoes, standing amidst the debris of industry. He was flanked by 4 men holding automatic rifles. They stood relaxed but alert, their fingers hovering near triggers. And there, sitting on a metal folding chair beside Hale, was Eli. Maya's breath hitched in her throat. The boy looked terrified. His wrists were bound with plastic zip ties, his ankles secured to the chair legs. He was pale, his eyes darting frantically around the room, but he appeared physically unharmed. When he saw Maya, he let out a muffled sound against the gag. Then his gaze shifted to the man beside her. Eli froze. He stared at Adrian, his eyes widening. A flicker of recognition passed over his small face, a memory struggling to surface through years of trauma. "Mr. Moretti," Hale called out, his voice smooth and echoing off the steel beams. "And Miss Ellis, I must say I am disappointed. I expected you to come alone." "Adrian, bringing the girlfriend? That is sentimental." "Where is the boy?" Adrian asked, ignoring the taunt. He stopped 20 feet away, his body angled to shield Maya. "He's right here," Hale said, resting a hand on Eli's shoulder. The boy flinched violently. "A commodity exchange. You have something of mine. I have something of yours." Adrian reached into his jacket pocket. The guards raised their rifles instantly. Adrian moved slowly, pulling out a silver flash drive. The ledger, Adrian said. Every account, every shell company, every payoff you made to the zoning commission and the judges, it is all here. Hale smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Throw it over, let the boy go first, Adrian countered. Hale laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You are in no position to bargain. Adrian, you have gone soft. 4 years ago. You would have burned this building down with me inside. Now, you are chasing lost children and social workers. You are weak. I am not weak, Adrian said, his voice dropping to a low growl. I am a father. Maya stepped forward. She let her shoulders slump, feigning a panic she did not have to work hard to fake. Please, she cried out, her voice shrill. Just give him the drive. Adrian, I just want Eli. Please, Mr. Hale, do not hurt him. She stumbled forward as if her legs were giving out, moving 5 feet closer to the chair. Hale sneered at her. Pathetic. Adrian tossed the flash drive. It arced through the air, clattering onto the concrete floor at Hale's feet. Hale bent to pick it up. Now, Adrian said. Let him go. Hale stood up, brushing dust from the drive. He pocketed it. Then he looked at Adrian with a look of pure malice. No, he said. He signaled to his men. Kill them both. The betrayal was expected, but the direction it came from was not. As Hale's men raised their rifles, one of the men standing behind Adrian, a man named Russo, who had driven Adrian's car for 3 years, suddenly pivoted. He raised his pistol, aiming not at the enemy, but at the back of Adrian's head. Adrian, Maya screamed. Adrian's instincts, honed by a lifetime of violence, saved him. He did not turn to look. He simply dove. He threw himself to the left, tackling Maya and rolling them both behind a stack of rotting pallets, just as Russo fired. The bullet missed Adrian's skull by inches, tearing through the side of his jacket and grazing his ribs. Chaos erupted. The windows of the warehouse shattered inward as Agent Miller's snipers opened fire from the roof. 2 of Hale's guards dropped instantly, the air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire, the screams of men and the smell of cordite. Stay down, Adrian roared, clutching his bleeding side. Maya did not stay down. She saw Eli. The boy was trapped in the center of the kill zone, still tied to the chair. His eyes squeezed shut as bullets chipped the concrete around him. Maya scrambled to her feet, crouching low, and sprinted across the open ground. Maya! Adrian shouted, reaching for her, but she was already gone. She threw herself at the chair, using her body as a human shield between Eli and the gunfire. She tackled the chair, knocking it over and dragging it and the boy behind the heavy metal casing of an old generator. Eli was hyperventilating, making high-pitched keening sounds of pure terror. Eli, look at me, Maya yelled over the noise, her hands working frantically at the zip ties on his wrists. It is Maya. You are safe. She could not loosen the plastic. It was too tight. She grabbed a shard of broken glass from the floor, ignoring the way it sliced into her own thumb, and sawed at the plastic. The tie snapped. Get down, she commanded, pushing his head down. Stay behind this machine. Do not move. She covered his head with her arms, curling over him like a shell, whispering promises of safety while the world exploded around them. Across the room, Adrian was moving. He ignored the burning pain in his side. He ignored the blood soaking his shirt. He saw only Hale, who was scrambling toward the back exit, and the traitor Russo, who was providing cover fire. Adrian broke from cover. He moved with a terrifying fluidity, closing the distance to Russo. The traitor turned, eyes wide, and fired 2 shots. One went wild, the other struck the floor near Adrian's boot. Adrian did not slow down. He struck Russo with the force of a freight train, slamming the barrel of his gun into the man's temple. Russo crumpled. Adrian stepped over the body and leveled his weapon at Hale. Vincent, he roared. Hale spun around, fumbling for a weapon he did not have. He backed up, tripping over debris until his back hit the rusted corrugated wall. Adrian was on him in a second. He kicked Hale's legs out from under him, sending the politician crashing to the dirty floor. Adrian pressed the muzzle of his gun directly against Hale's forehead. The warehouse went suddenly silent. The federal agents had secured the room. Hale's men were down or surrendered. There was only the heavy breathing of the 2 men and the soft sobbing of a child from behind the generator. Please, Hale whimpered, raising his hands. Adrian, be reasonable. We can make a deal. I have money. Accounts you do not know about. You stole my son, Adrian snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. You stole 4 years. Do it, Hale taunted, a manic desperation in his eyes. Kill me. Show them who you really are. You are a killer. Moretti. You belong in a cage. If you pull that trigger, you go away for life. The boy grows up alone. Again. Adrian's hand shook. The rage was a red tide in his vision. He wanted to pull the trigger. Every instinct in his body screamed for vengeance. He visualized all the nights he had spent staring at that portrait, all the pain Luca had endured. Then he heard a voice. Adrian. It was Maya. She was standing up from behind the generator, holding Eli's hand. She was disheveled, bleeding from a cut on her hand, but her eyes were steady. Don't, she said softly. Adrian looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the hope. He remembered her words on the deck. Come back to me. He looked at Hale, sweating and pathetic on the floor. He looked at Eli, who was peeking out from behind Maya's legs, watching him with wide, terrified eyes. If he pulled the trigger, he confirmed everything Eli feared. He became the monster. Adrian clenched his jaw so hard he felt a tooth crack. I am not you. He spat at Hale. He shifted his aim. He lowered the gun 6 inches, moving the barrel from Hale's forehead to his shoulder. He fired. The shot was deafening. Hale screamed, clutching his shoulder as the bullet shattered his clavicle, pinning him to the floor in agony but leaving him alive. Adrian holstered his weapon and stepped back, his hands raised in surrender as Agent Miller and his team swarmed the room. Secure him. Miller shouted, pointing at Hale. Get a medic! Adrian did not look at the agents. He did not look at Hale, who was moaning on the ground. He turned slowly toward the generator. He sank to his knees. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him shaking and exhausted. He held out his empty hands. The room seemed to hold its breath. Eli stepped out from behind Maya. He looked at the man kneeling in the glass and dust. He looked at the dark hair, the shape of the jaw, and the small white scar on Adrian's forehead, a mirror image of the one on his own temple. He took a hesitant step forward. Dad, he whispered. The word was small, rusty from disuse, but it carried the weight of the world. Adrian let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Luca, he choked out. The boy ran. He crossed the distance in a blur and slammed into Adrian's chest. Adrian's arms closed around him, burying his face in the boy's small neck, rocking him back and forth, weeping openly, unashamedly. I have got you, Adrian sobbed. I have got you. I am never letting go. Maya stood watching them, tears streaming down her dusty face, her heart breaking and healing all at once. The fallout was swift and absolute, with the ledger in federal custody and Hale screaming confessions in the hospital to try and cut a deal. The network crumbled. The shell companies were seized. The corrupt judges were indicted. The rot that had infected the city's child welfare system was cut out with surgical precision. Harbor Light was cleared. Sister Joan retired quietly, and a new board of directors was appointed, one vetted personally by Maya, who was reinstated with a public apology from the mayor's office. But justice required a price. Adrian kept his word. He sat in a sterile interrogation room with Agent Miller and laid out the inner workings of the Moretti Syndicate. He dismantled his own empire brick by brick. In exchange for his cooperation and for delivering Hale, the federal prosecutors offered a deal: 5 years of strict probation, heavy fines, and a complete divestment from all illicit activities. It was a heavy price for a man of his stature. It meant the end of his power. It meant he was no longer the king of Greyhaven, but he had made the trade willingly. 8 months later, the modest house sat on the edge of the bay, miles away from the imposing mansion on the cliffs. It was a simple 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and a yard that needed mowing. Inside, the living room was a disaster zone of plastic bricks. Luca, now 10 years old and filling out with healthy meals and regular sleep, was kneeling on the rug, and he was constructing a massive, multicolored fortress. No, Dad, the tower goes here, Luca instructed seriously, handing a red brick to Adrian. Right. Strategic defense, Adrian said, snapping the brick into place with the same focus he used to apply to corporate takeovers. Maya watched them from the kitchen doorway, a dish rag in her hand. Adrian looked different. He wore jeans and a t-shirt, his hair slightly longer, the lines of stress around his eyes replaced by laugh lines. He looked lighter. She looked at the wall above the fireplace. The heavy, lonely oil painting of the lost boy was gone. In its place hung a framed photograph, taken 3 months ago. It showed Adrian, Maya, and Luca standing on a pier. The wind was blowing their hair, and they were all laughing. It was imperfect, candid, and radiated a warmth that the old portrait never possessed. Maya smiled, remembering that rainy night in the mansion hallway. "That is the boy from the orphanage," she had gasped. It felt like a lifetime ago. They had walked through fire to get here. "All right, architects," Maya called out. "Bedtime. School tomorrow." Maya, just 5 more minutes?" Luca pleaded, giving her the puppy dog eyes that he had definitely inherited from his father. 5 minutes, she conceded, then teeth brushed. She watched as Adrian leaned over and kissed the top of Luca's head, whispering something that made the boy giggle. 20 minutes later, the house was quiet. Luca was asleep, the fortress guarding his dreams. Maya stepped out onto the back deck. The night air was cool, smelling of salt and pine. The moon was a sliver of silver over the black water. The sliding door opened behind her. Adrian stepped out. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder. "He is out cold," Adrian murmured. "He had a big day," Maya said, leaning into him. She placed her hands over his, feeling the solid warmth of him. Adrian turned her around gently so she was facing him. He looked down at her, the moonlight catching the silver in his eyes. He reached up and cupped her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For everything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For fighting me. For fighting for him. You saved his life. Maya, and you saved my soul. I would have died in that warehouse, or in a prison cell, if it were not for you. You saved yourself." "Adrian," she whispered, "you put the gun down, because of you." He lowered his head. The kiss was slow, deliberate, and full of a smoldering promise. It wasn't desperate anymore. It was the kiss of a man who had everything to lose and had managed to keep it all. It was deep and affectionate, their bodies pressed close, the heat between them tempered by a profound, abiding peace. Maya sighed against his lips, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I love you," she said. "I love you," he replied against her mouth. They turned together, Adrian keeping his arm around her shoulders. They looked through the glass of the sliding door. Inside, in the soft glow of the nightlight, they could see Luca sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm of safety. The danger was over. The past was buried, and here, in this small house by the water, they had built something unbreakable, a family. Closing message. Thank you so much for listening to the final chapter of That's the Boy from the Orphanage, she gasped. It was the mafia boss's lost son portrait. I hope you enjoyed this journey of danger, redemption, and love. I would love to hear your thoughts on Adrian and Maya's ending. Did they make the right choices? Please leave a comment down below and tell me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far our stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next story.